Happy Monday, football fans. Welcome in. You have found the Behind the Lines podcast for week number 10 in the NFL. My name is Stephen Andress, joined each and every week on this show by Christian Cipollini, sports trader over at BetMGM. On this show, we are going to look at the week that was betting in week 9, the biggest public wins, the biggest public losses. We'll also look ahead to Monday Night Football between the Saints and the Ravens, whether or not that can sway the result for the book for week 9. And we'll also look at the openers for week 10 odds in the National Football League and share any early bets that I might have and a curious futures price movement that we're seeing on one of the award markets here in the NFL. But first of all, Christian, thanks again for joining us. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Another great football Sunday, so happy to be back.
Absolutely. Was it a great football Sunday for the book, or was it a great football Sunday for the public?
Yeah, this was a great one for the book. Probably the best one of the season so far, up there. Definitely top.
I'm guessing teams like the Buffalo Bills losing outright and the Chiefs not covering in a primetime slot were among the biggest wins for the book. But what else stood out there in terms of the biggest public losses?
The Packers were one of our biggest outcomes of the season, actually. That low scoring game, along with we actually had a ton of Packers backers, close to like 75% of our bets, which is kind of surprising seeing how they've been the past few weeks, but that was one of our better outcomes.
Yeah, and I think when we get to the week 10 opening odds, we're going to see another indication that you guys as the book have downgraded the Packers even more so than you did last week, where they were, still above average, top 16, we'll say, but below teams like the Miami Dolphins. I think they're sliding even more once we get to this line this week that the Packers have. How about the flip side here? What were any of the notable public wins for week number 10? I'm sorry, week number 9.
So that was the thing. We didn't have any this week.
Really?
Yeah. Every game was a winner for us on Sunday. So it was a very good Sunday. There were 2 that were small winners. That was the Vikings and Commanders game, so that push helped the book there, and the Dolphins-Bears game was also just a small winner. But all in all, every game this week actually ended up a winner for the book.
You and I have been doing this podcast since the start of last season. I can't recall a time where you have said something like that to me since we started week 1 of the 2021 season. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, for sure. And maybe once. Usually there's a game that's a small loser, but nothing I can't remember like this, at least certainly not this season.
Wow. It's tough out in them NFL streets, man. It is not easy betting the NFL these days. That is for sure.
Really unpredictable season so far. No one would have guessed the Seahawks being up the top of the division, both New York teams with winning records. So it's just everything's been all over the place.
I think teasers have probably been really good for the book as well this season, right? I mean, it seems like every week there's a big favorite that is a popular teaser leg that's losing or not even just not covering the teaser leg, but losing outright, like we just saw with the Buffalo Bills this past week.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the Bills, I think we had like 80-90% of our bets on the Bills. Basically couldn't write many Jets bets, and they lose outright.
Wow. So I already know at this point that nothing can happen on Monday Night Football between the Ravens and the Saints that can flip the outcome here overall for the public in week 9. But let us know where your action is here as we record on Monday morning going into this matchup down in New Orleans in the Superdome.
Yeah, we're still we're rooting for the Saints for sure. About 70% of our money is on the Ravens. So, but it's not going to change the outcome for the week, but we're rooting for the Saints here at the book.
As are we at TheLines.com. A handful of our staff members do like the Saints in this matchup. The number has dipped a little bit from earlier in the week with the Mark Andrews news that he's not going to play tonight. And they also lose Rashad Bateman for the season. So Lamar Jackson's running out of weapons there in Baltimore. And I believe you're looking at around 1.5 on the spread for this one as we record Monday morning. Is that right?
Yep. Ravens minus 1.5.
There we go. So I'm on the teaser leg for this one. I got it up to 8.5 earlier this week. I still think it's a good teaser leg at up to 7.5 at this point. So that's kind of where I'm at with this one. But yeah, we're right there with you. So hopefully both the Lines and BetMGM win on Monday Night Football
would be
this
nice,
week.
yeah.
All right, so let's look ahead now to week number 10 in the NFL. And I got to be honest with you, I usually have an early week bet here that I like right off the bat. It's been at least one of them every week this season, but this is a tough board. I think this is the toughest board I've seen so far this season, at least with where the numbers are right now. In week 10. But let's work our way through these here with the opening odds. We'll start with Thursday night football, the Atlanta Falcons at the Carolina Panthers.
Falcons are 2.5-point road favorites. The total is 42.5.
I don't know who the Panthers are anymore. Like one week they're taking the Falcons to overtime. The next week they're getting just annihilated by Joe Mixon for 5 touchdowns. So, and then they fire 2 more coaches on the defensive side. I have to imagine that they are literally running out of coaches at this point. Like, I don't know who's left. They already fired a bunch when they fired their head coach earlier this season. And it wasn't just him that got fired. Now Steve Wilkes, the interim's firing guys. So, I don't know. The cupboard's running bare over there in Carolina in terms of coaching. So this is an interesting one here, especially with the fact that it's a divisional game and B, they just played each other a couple of weeks ago. So really interesting spot here overall for this one. We have another game here, an international game. We head to Germany, Christian. And Munich, I believe. And Oktoberfest is over, but I'm sure that the Hefeweizens will be flowing for the Seattle Seahawks against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Again, neutral site here, obviously, so no home field advantage baked into this line with a Tampa Bay Buccaneers team that barely squeaked by the Rams to stay alive and at least keep hopes alive to salvaging their season and squeak into the playoffs. And an upstart team in Seattle who the market has had no respect for all season. And once again, they make them an underdog in this one.
Yeah, the surging Seahawks there, but they end up being a 1.5-point dog here to the Bucs, and that totals 44.5.
I want to look a little bit more into the matchups for this one with the trenches, the offensive lines against the defensive lines on both sides. I want to look into a little bit more about what the Bucs defense is at this point. We obviously thought they'd be elite coming into the season. They've had some injuries, and Seattle has done their part to prove that I think they are a top 10 team in the league at this point, at least in my opinion. I don't think the market's quite there yet on them. Clearly, they're still making them an underdog in this game. I think this could be an early week bet for me. I'm high on the Seahawks. I'm going to continue to be high on the Seahawks. I bet them outright last week against Arizona. I bet them in teaser legs, and they came through for me. And I'm not sure that I think the Bucs are back by any stretch of the imagination. So I would advise people, if you haven't already, go to TheLines.com, type top right-hand corner, hit the Discord button. Inside our free Discord channel, go to the Rolls server, and you can hit the buttons for push notifications anytime anybody on our staff locks in a bet to make sure you get the best of the number. I might be on Seattle again this week. We'll see. 1 o'clock games, Christian, on the East Coast here, East Coast time for Week 10 opening lines over at BetMGM.
Yeah, Vikings at Bills. Bills are 7.5-point favorites even after that loss, and the total is 48.5. Lions at Bears. Bears are 2.5-point favorites. Total is 48.5. Broncos at the Titans. The Titans are 3-point favorites at home. The total is 39. Jaguars at the Chiefs. Chiefs are 10-point favorites at home. The total is 49.5. Browns at Dolphins. Dolphins are open up at 4-point favorites at home, total 48.5. Texans at the Giants. Giants are 6.5-point favorites and a much lower total at 38.5. Last one of the 1 o'clocks, Saints at Steelers. Saints are 2.5-point favorites on the road with a 41.5-point total.
I initially thought I was going to bet the Saints on that one, being less than the key number of 3, but it is on the road. It looks like TJ Watt might be back. I think the Saints have looked really good. I think this is one of these mid-season adjustments we have to make with the Saints after how bad they looked the first month of the season. This offense is looking really good. And what's been encouraging to me is that now Alvin Kamara is getting usage in the pass game that we haven't seen since Drew Brees was the quarterback. So they're getting back to using him as a huge portion of this pass game, which is really encouraging. And then it seems like nobody can stop Taysom Hill in short yardage situations when they put him back there in the Wildcat/quarterback. So arrow up for the Saints to me at this point. I think there's an outside chance they could still win this division with how weak it has been. A couple other interesting notes here, I think, is the Chicago Bears offense. You mentioned midseason adjustments on offenses. We have to respect the Bears offense at this point. I mean, they started showing signs that Thursday night game, Christian, I think you remember, against Washington, where they just had bad red zone luck, but they were moving the ball at will. And then they go out and score a ton of points against two really good defenses run by Bill Belichick and then the Dallas Cowboys. Now, they couldn't stop Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, but now they get the Lions. And apparently the Packers are just broken because the Lions going into that game were like bottom one, like literally the worst of the worst passing defense in the NFL. I don't give much credit to the Lions for that. And I think, would you agree that we have to make an adjustment on the Bears at this point? And I'm not sure they're the bottom three team in the NFL anymore that we thought for the first month or so of the season.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think even the line kind of shows that. I'm not sure what the look ahead line was, but I wouldn't expect them to be favorites in this spot, or at least a lot closer than it is. But yeah, the last couple of weeks they've been surging and scoring a ton of points, which is very unlike a Bears offense we've seen over the past decade.
You know what it reminds me of? Justin Fields goes and runs for 140 yards and a touchdown on top of throwing for 3 touchdowns. It reminds me of prime Cam Newton when he was in Carolina winning the MVP. They're starting to utilize Justin Fields more into that kind of single wing quarterback offense where if your quarterback is part of the rushing attack, well, now you have better numbers. You have an extra blocker in there in the running game, whereas if you don't have a mobile quarterback, he's useless and you're playing 10 on 11. So now you're playing 11 on 11 and you're seeing the dividends of that with Chicago's offense. So I would not be shocked at all if this line moves to 3. I think there are actually a couple of your competitors that have moved this to 3, and I wouldn't be surprised if by midweek the Chicago Bears are on that key number of -3. You're at -2.5, -110 right now, I believe, right?
Yep, correct. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think some action's coming in here on the Bears this week, my friend.
Yeah, so if you like that, better get it in now because it might be moving.
The other note I'll say, you mentioned the Bills still being 7.5 off of the loss to the Jets. It has come down off the look ahead. This was 9.5 on the look ahead. And now we have Ian Rappaport saying Monday morning that Josh Allen got hit in the throwing elbow at the end of the game and has got a little bit of pain. It doesn't sound like it's anything serious, but it's at least something that we're going to have to monitor here this week with Josh Allen and his elbow. So we're down 2 points off the look ahead. So at least notable there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's just interesting too. I'd have to go back and look, but I wouldn't think that many 7-1 teams have been 7.5 point dogs. Just an interesting spot.
Yeah, absolutely. And, our staff, I know at least Eli and myself, I know Matt Brown disagrees, but Eli and me have been skeptical of the Minnesota Vikings with their underlying metrics, despite their record. Their defense is what concerns me, right? They're secondary. Taylor Heineke wasn't able to take advantage of it. They played a lot of other weaker opponents in the weeks prior to that. They got spanked by the Eagles earlier in the season, whatever. That was a long time ago. But let's see if this defense can show up against Josh Allen now and keep this inside of a possession. That's another question.
For sure. I mean, they didn't look great yesterday. And I think that's kind of where that line is showing you. It's just interesting that 7-1 team is like that, but yeah.
That'd be
been
interesting.
A weird year.
Yeah, very weird. It's like elite tier and everybody else clearly with these numbers that we're seeing here. For a 7-1 team to be a 7.5 point dog is wild here. Yeah. Okay, the late window here, and thank you NFL for giving us more than 2 games for Red Zone in the 4:00 window in Week 10. We have 3 games now. Great. So here is the openers at BetMGM for the 4:00 Eastern time window.
Colts at Raiders. Raiders are 6-point favorites with a 42.5 point total. Cowboys at the Packers. Cowboys are 5.5 point favorites on the road 42.5-point total. And last of the 4 o'clocks, Cardinals at the Rams. Rams are 3-point favorites with a 43.5-point total.
God, I'm not sure any team should be a 6-point dog against the Raiders, but I can't bet on Sam Ehlinger, man. I can't do it. It's just goodness gracious. And it blew up in their face against Belichick, but man, I'm not sure the Raiders should be 6 points against anybody. I'm going to have to talk to my staff and see what they think about this one, because that one's got my eye, but that's a really hard pill to swallow at this point to back the Sam Ehlinger Colts with what we've seen from him in the past couple of weeks here. We mentioned the Packers earlier in the podcast, Christian. For them to be 5.5-point home dogs to the Dallas Cowboys, clearly to me is another indication that you guys have downgraded them even further. Would you describe that as an accurate opinion?
Oh, yeah, for sure. They've dropped significantly in our outright numbers. And I mean, they couldn't move the ball against one of the worst defense, maybe the worst defense, the Detroit Lions. And now they get arguably the best defense in the league. So I can't picture them scoring many points.
I'm pulling it up right now. I'm very curious what the summer opener was on this game for now to see the Packers as a 5-point dog to the Dallas Cowboys. And the Packers were a 4-point home favorite on the opener in this game before the season started. And now it's 5.5, a 9.5-point swing from the preseason opener. And I can't say it's not justified, because the Packers look broken. The defense is blah. I mean, they can't stop the run, and the Dallas Cowboys love to run the ball. And now you have a Dallas ferocious defense with a ferocious pass rush going up against a Packers offensive line that is getting old and battered and injured and couldn't even move the ball against a bottom 3, maybe the worst defense in the league in the Detroit Lions. So, man, you have to have a lot of faith at this point to back the Packers. But, we've seen the Cowboys in this role in recent years where they are a big favorite in a game, especially on the road, and they come up short against a team that has traditionally been good. But I'm not sure the Packers we can describe as a good team anymore. I'm not sure that's a fair statement to say. You look at their logo and it intrigues you, but from what we've seen on the field this year, the Packers have been a below average football team in the NFL. Primetime slate, Christian, here. 2 more to go. And this Sunday night one is very interesting.
Yeah, Chargers at the 49ers. 49ers are 7-point favorites here at home. That's 46.5-point total. Monday night, Commanders at the Eagles. Eagles are 10.5-point favorites, 44.5-point total.
The Eagles keep being huge favorites at this point because they are rightfully one of the top 3 teams in the NFL, not only just from casual fans, but in the betting market as well. They have earned that designation, but the style in which they play football does not, in my opinion, lead to a lot of double-digit blowouts. We have seen that they step on the gas in the first half, in particular the second quarter, score a ton of points, and then they are quite content to kind of coast to the end of the game when they get up big. So 10.5 is interesting to me here in a divisional matchup against a Washington team. Say what you want about Taylor Heineke, they at least have a good offensive line that gives him opportunities to deliver to his receivers. So not a bet for me yet, but it's interesting to me that we're getting 10.5 here with Washington. Somehow, Christian, you're killing me with this Washington team because I hate this team. But every week you give me just enough points where I'm tempted to back Washington. It's driving me nuts. Can you make them lower spreads so I can stop betting on Washington? Goodness. And then this other one, I believe this is like at least a 2.5, maybe 3-point move on the look ahead here, right? With the Chargers, they win the game against Atlanta, albeit not in impressive fashion, but they still went on the road across the country and win the game in Atlanta. And we get 3 extra points now from the look ahead on this game with San Francisco. So is this action that you guys have taken on San Francisco from the look ahead, or is this more market respect or just your book's opinion on where San Francisco is at this point coming off a bye?
It's more market respect, but I'd assume that bye kind of has a little bit to do with that. The Chargers didn't look terrible But yeah, I'd say that is a surprising number. I think we'd take a decent amount on that Chargers +7, just due to that high number of where both teams are kind of still figuring themselves out, I guess.
Well, you certainly have two teams that are at opposite ends of the health spectrum here, right? You have the Chargers, who have a million different injuries. Their two starting wide receivers are injured. We'll see about Keenan Allen. I'm not optimistic. Their defense really has been below average across the board. And now the 49ers have another week to get healthy off of the bye and after the drubbing they put on the Rams. So, but it's at least interesting that this has moved so much off the look-ahead line for sure. Christian, final note I want to just mention here in the MVP market. And you mentioned the Dolphins being 4-point favorites. The MVP market has flipped here a little bit. Josh Allen was a clear favorite last week. They lose to the Jets. Now the books have different favorites across the board. Some of them have Josh Allen. Some of them have Patrick Mahomes after he basically carried the Chiefs to a close win against the Titans on Sunday night. Jalen Hurts is still clearly in that solid top three candidates who are all shorter than 3-1 to win MVP. But Tua is interesting, at least in terms of a long shot discussion here. And I think there are some similarities to what we saw in 2016 when Matt Ryan won the MVP. And I'm not saying Tua is Matt Ryan from that season. I actually think he's more Tom Brady from that season. Tom Brady only played 12 games that year, but he had 28 touchdowns and only two interceptions. He had a rating of 112. He didn't win the award, but despite only playing 12 games, he was clearly right there in the conversation till the very end, and the voters gave it to Matt Ryan instead. This year, if we look at the statistics for the quarterbacks, Tua has missed 3 games. It's clear he matters. They lost all 3 games that he didn't play and didn't look very good at all on offense. He has a 115.9 passer rating. The next closest is 107.8 for Jalen Hurts. So that is a big gap between him and the next closest guy in terms of passer rating. He's not going to have the overall counting stats that these other quarterbacks have after missing 3 games, but his efficiency numbers are clearly among, if not the best in the NFL. So I'm curious where you have Tua right now in your NFL MVP market. And I believe this has shortened a little bit from the last week or two.
Yeah, he was 80-1 before Sunday, and now down to 40-1, which is about tied for like 7th-ish right now. But yeah, he's been the missed games are definitely going to hurt him. But even when you talked about those numbers that he's still trying to chase, I mean, each week him and Tyreek Hill just seem to connect for 100-something yards, and same with Jalen Waddle. So if he keeps this up, and maybe the Dolphins go on a little run like they did last year in the second half of the season, it's definitely a decent long shot.
Well, I'm not sure Josh Allen is some unbeatable favorite that we thought they were. And I know that's a little bit of hindsight after they just lost to the Jets, but he now has 8 interceptions on the year. If that continues and he puts up 16 interceptions, I don't think that puts him in the MVP conversation. Patrick Mahomes, it's clear the Chiefs have not quite hit the 5th gear, so to speak, with this team to go out and drub teams. Although Mahomes was literally like their entire offense on Sunday night, not only throwing, but rushing as well. Jalen Hurts is going to be a favorite every single game the rest of the season. So I'm not saying that they aren't the rightful favorites, but if Tua continues to put up these monster efficiency numbers, plus we have to remember this is an award voted on by humans, so narratives do tend to come into play. The entire country watched him have a very violent injury on national television in prime time, and he comes back and starts doing amazing things still. Now that might start to enter into voters' minds as well. Among the long shots, I think that's the guy that I would take a shot on. But I'm not sure it's narrative and it's efficiency, because he's not going to have the counting numbers. So, and I'm not sure the voters will give him the credit versus giving Tyreek Hill maybe an offensive player of the year or a Mike McDaniel a head coach of the year. We'll see what they do with that. I think it's obvious that Tua needs to get some credit here, but there's a lot of other factors that I think get as much, if not more credit. So
if the Dolphins end up winning that division over the Bills, I'd imagine he's right up there at that point, kind of, almost flopping him with Josh Allen, obviously depending on how the rest of the season goes. But a lot of it will depend on how they can finish out this second half of the season and how many wins they can tack on.
You make a great point, Christian, because so much of this is not so much player stats completely. Obviously, it's a ton of it, but where you are in the standings, you're not very often going to see an NFL quarterback win MVP on a wild card team, right? Like there's part of the equation is how many wins you have for better or worse.
Yeah. So,
awesome.
I mean, you can see it in the top three favorites. It's Allen, Mahomes, and Jalen Hurts, who are the top three teams, in the power rankings every week. So a lot of it is based on how the team's performing.
Well, don't look now. The Bills are 6-2. The Chiefs are 6-2. The Jets and the Dolphins are 6-3. And there's a bunch of other teams that are 5-3. It is jam-packed in the AFC right now. So who knows how this is going to play out the rest of the way, but at least I think an interesting long shot if you haven't entered the market yet for NFL MVP. Christian, as always, appreciate the insight. Awesome show again this week. For the rest of you, we will be back the rest of this week with some more NFL content as we always do. Beat the Closing Line will be out tomorrow with Nicole, Mo, and Eli. Megapod on Friday as well. And a brand new college basketball podcast launched today with Eli Hershkovich and Scott Phillips called Outside Shots. You can find that on the Lines podcast feed. You can also find it on our YouTube channel. Be sure to check it out. They're diving into the preseason top 25, the futures market, to get you ready for college hoops, which has a full slate of games here for you to bet on over at BetMGM right now. On Monday, November 7th, it is here. Good stuff. Thanks for watching. Best of luck with your bets here in the NFL in week number 10.